Hey friends, Shalom Aleichem, and welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Aleph, Daf 31 of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. Friends, first of all, we're getting L'maaseh kind of close to the end of Masechta Rosh Hashanah, so that's very nice. Today's the Gewaldige Daf, friends. Some very interesting stuff on today's Daf. Let's just jump in, L'maaseh. It's some pretty interesting stuff. So, we're going to start Daf Lamed Aleph, top line of the page. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Akiva. So it says Rabbi Yehuda in the name of his Rabbi Akiva. Barishon Ma'ayu Omer in the Beis Hamikdash. What was the Shir Shal Yom that the Levim would sing on Sunday? Lashem Ha'aretzim Lo, that to the Eibishter is the world and everything in it. Hashem Shechina v'Hikna v'Shalut Ba'olamo. Because the Eibishter on the first day of creation, he acquired the world and also sort of made it acquired and ruled over his world, made it like acquired to the people who live in it. What did the Levim sing on the second day of the week, on Monday? Gadol Hashem Hula Ma'od, that great is the Eibishter and he is very praised. Hashem Shechilek Maisav, that he divided his actions. I think is that when he divided the firmaments, I think? What are firmaments? But I'm not a bucky on the Maaseh Bereishis. I don't remember it offhand. I have to look it up. Do you guys know what happened in all the 7 days? Alright. Umalach Alein, and he ruled over them. Alright. Bashlisha Yomim, well, I know what happened on Shabbos. That one's easy, I guess. Also, day 6, I think that's when man was created. Okay. Akoponim. Akoponim. I mean, we're going to list some of the stuff over here. I mean, Bashlisha Yom, they would say on Tuesday, Elokim Midas Ba'das Kel, that, or maybe Ba'das El, that the Eibishter stands in a commune, a gathering of like judges, I guess. Hashem Shegila Eretz B'chochmaso, that he revealed the land with his wisdom, Ve'echen Teva La'adaso, and prepared the earth, the land, for his, people. Baraviya Yomim, congregation. On Wednesday they would say, El Nekamas Hashem, that God is vengeful. Hashem Shebarach Chamu Levana, because on Wednesday apparently God created the sun and the moon. Ve'asid Lipareya Me Ovdeh, and in the future he's going to exact punishment from those who worship the sun and the moon. Friends, don't worship the sun and the moon. On Thursday, they would say, that, let's sing, I guess, to serenade. That's a very nice word. I don't know if that's what Harninu means, but it's a nice word. So to serenade to God our strength. Al Shem Shabar Ofis Vidagim, because on Thursday, the Eibishter created birds and fish, the Shabeach Lishmo, in order to praise his name. I mean, I hear that. I mean, some people are really into birds. Friends, you guys into birds? Like, some birds can mamish be very exquisite, and then you look at the bird and you praise the Eibishter. Bashisha Yomim, and they would say on Friday, Hashemalach Yeus Lavesh, that the Eibishter is king and he wears, pride? Hashem Gomer Malachto Umalach Alein, because on the 6th day, on Friday, the Eibishter completed his work and ruled over them. Bashvir Yomim, and on Shabbos they would say Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos, that will sing a song to the day of Shabbos, Lom Shekulu Shabbos, to the day that is entirely Shabbos. Now that sounds very, very spiritual and lofty. A day that's entirely Shabbos. Doesn't that sound amazing? Well, the thing is, the day that's entirely Shabbos is a reference to the point when the world will be destroyed, and it will only be Shabbos because there's not going to be any humans around. So, go figure. Yom Shekulo Shabbos. All right. Let's go weiter. Shtickle. Reb Nechemia, Maro Reb Akiva L'chalik Ben Aprokim Alalu. How come Reb Akiva made a distinction between the 6 days of the week and Shabbos? The 6 days of the week were all based on things that happened, right? God, created birds and fish, so that's why we say that. That's why we say, Hanina L'Elokim Uzenu. Now, that was on Thursday, right? So like all of those things were based on things that happened. Yet when it comes to Shabbos, it's not based on something that happened in the past. It's based on something that will happen in the future, right? There's going to be this Yom Shekulo Shabbos, which we're going to learn about in a second, maybe a minute. So that's Rabbi Nechemiah's kasha. How come Rabbi Yehuda, who is a colleague of Rabbi Nechemiah, is saying in the name of Rabbi Akiva, who is Rabbi Nechemiah's teacher, if I'm not mistaken, why is there a distinction between the 6 days that are based on events that happened in the past and Shabbos, which he's arguing is based on what will be in the future, the Yom Shekulo Shabbos? Ella, rather, says Rabbi Nechemiah, he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda in the name of Rabbi Akiva regarding the first 6. So I'll read through them quickly. Barishon kana v'hikne v'shalut be'olamo b'sheni shechilik ma'asuk malach aleim b'shlishi shegila eretz b'chochmoso v'eichin teva la'adaso b'arvi shebaracham u'levana v'asa li'premi ovden b'chamishi shebar ofis v'dagim l'shabeach l'shmo b'ashishi shegam malachto malach aleim. Okay, so all of those were the same. The first 6 days were the same. Now, b'ashvi'i, the difference is that when it comes to Shabbos, it's not based on what will happen in the future, but rather al shem sheshavas. It's because on Shabbos God rested. So that is, so we say Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos, and that is not talking about the Yom Shekulo Shabbos in the future. Rather, it's talking about the day upon which, that on Shabbos, L'maisa, God rested after a very busy week. Fine. And Rabbi Nechemiah and Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rabbi Akiva are arguing with regard to the following statement of Rabbi Katina, the Amar of Katina, Shisa Alfei Shnei Ava Alma, that the world will last for 6,000 years, v'chad charuv, and then for 1,000 years, the world will be sort of empty, destroyed. Shenemar v'nizkav Hashem levado b'yamahu, that the Eibishter will remain alone on that day. So, okay, let's go back there for a second. Abaye Omar trei charuv, whereas Abaye says no taka, for 2,000 years the world will be desolate. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, zichayenu miyomayim, bring us back to life from 2, days, which is a reference to these 2,000 years that the world will be desolate. So, according to Rav Katine, so there's a Yom Shekulo Shabbos. There's this, right, 6,000 years, which represents the 6 days of the week. And then there's the 1,000, which represents Shabbos, and the world will be desolate. So, Rabbi Akiva says, okay, so Keneged, that 1,000 years, that's the Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos, Yom Shekulo Shabbos. Now, according to Abaye, however, it's 2,000 years that it's going to be desolate, in which case it doesn't align with the, if you say 6,000 years, each 1,000 years represents 1 day of the week, so then if you say that the 7th 1,000 is going to be destroyed, so then Yom Shekulo Shabbos, so that's Kilo what the 7th day is. But according to Abaye, there's taka 2,000 years, so it doesn't align with a 7th day. It's like a 7th and 8th, therefore it kind of doesn't work out, and therefore, if you take that view, so then what's the Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos? It's not talking about the Yom Shekulo Shabbos, because there isn't a Yom Shekulo Shabbos, there's a Yomayim Shekulo Shabbos. So rather, it's talking about the fact that God rested on the 7th day. So the Maaseh, we sort of commemorate that in Mizmor Shel Yom HaShabbos in the Beis HaMikdash. B'musaf the Shabbos Ma'ayu Omer. What would they sing on Musaf? Omer of Choron Barove, Omer Rav, Haziv Loch. Alright, it's a reference to Azinu. The 6 prakim, the 6 parts of the poem of Ha'azinu. So that is what was recited, sang, crooned, what was the word I used a minute ago? Serenaded in the Beis HaMikdash on Musaf of Shabbos. Okay. And the same way that they would divide up Ha'azinu into 6 portions in the Beis HaMikdash at Musaf. So that was the same 6 portions, the first 6 aliyahs of Parshas Ha'azinu, when we read it in the synagogue, so it's divided up in the same way as they would divide it up in the Beis HaMikdash. And Shabbos Musaf. What would they croon at Mincha and Shabbos? What would they serenade at Mincha and Shabbos? Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Az Yashir, Michamocha v'Az Yashir, says Rabbi Yochanan, they would serenade 3 chapters, Az Yashir, until Michamocha Be'elim Hashem, then they would say, Michamocha Be'elim Hashem, till the end of Az Yashir, and then the second Az Yashir, what is it? Yisrael Sashir Azos Ali Ve'er Enula. That's what they would serenade. They want to know. So we had basically said that they would sing at Musaf the 6 portions of Ha'azinu at Mincha, these Azashir, Michamocha, and Azashir. So would they say all 6 at Musaf and all 3 at Mincha every single Shabbos? Or was it 1 chapter of Ha'azinu each Shabbos, so it would take 6 weeks to go through all of it, and 1 chapter of Kielu Azyashir, Michamocha, Azyashir each Shabbos at Mincha, in which case it would take 3 weeks to go through that. So it was a 6-week cycle for Musaf and a 3-week cycle for Mincha, or was it everything just every week? So Tashma Kaminir, the Tanya Rabbi Yossi says, Rabbi Yossi ad sherishona omeres achas shnia choser shtayim shmamino kol Shabbos v'Shabbos amri chad shmamino. So says Rabbi Yossi that in the amount that it would take for the Musaf recitings to go through once, the Mincha would already have gone through twice, meaning that every week they would say 1 chapter. Now Ha'azinu was 6 chapters, so it takes 6 weeks to go through it, whereas at Mincha it would be Azyashir, Michamocha, Azyashir, i.e. it would take 3 weeks to go through at the rate of 1 chapter a day, of 1 chapter a week. So by the time you went through all 6 chapters of Ha'azinu at Musaf, of Mincha, over the course of 6 weeks, you already went through the 3 chapters of Mincha, of Azyashir, Michamocha, Azyashir, over the course of 2-3 week blocks. Let's go weiter. Fine. Amar Yehuda bar Idi Amar Yochanan. Oh, friends, you ready for this? Paper boy's here. Let's go, paper boy. Boom. Driving off into the night. Although now that they changed the daylight savings thing, so I don't know, maybe it's Takadon already. Maybe it's Takadon. Okay. Amar Yehuda bar Idi Amar Yochanan. Eser Masos Nasa Shechina. Mikrai Uchneidan Galso Sandhedrin Migemara. Wow. Alright. See that again. Eser Masos Nasa Shechina Mikrai. So we can learn out from Psukim that the Shechina moved 10 times from the Kapores, where is sort of the default, the ideal place where we would like the Shechina to be. It made 10 stops until it went back up to the sky. And also the Sanhedrin traveled 10 times from the Lishkas Agazis in the Beis Hamikdash to its final place in, the Gemara says here it was Tiberia. Although it was a kasha, maybe it was Taka Tzipori. Anyways, fine. And that is not learned out from Psukim, that's learned out from sort of traditions. Go back to Esem, so we learn out from Psukim that the Shechina moved 10 times. Mikaporis l'chruv. Okay, the first journey was from the Kapores, which is, on top of the lid of the Arun, to the Kruvim, which is not a very far journey, literally just from the lid to the Kruvim that are on the lid. Mikruv l'chruv, and then from one Kruv to the other Kruv. Mikruv l'miftan, then from that second Kruv to the threshold of, sounds like the Heichel. Miftan l'chotzer, and then from the threshold of the Heichel to the Azara, essentially. And from the sort of first part of the Azara, I guess, Ben Ulam la Mizbeach maybe, to the Mizbeach itself, Mizbeach lagag, then from the Mizbeach to the roof of the Heichel, Umigag l'choma, and from the roof to the walls of the temple, I think, Umichoma le'ir, and from the walls to the city of Jerusalem, Me'ir lahar, and from the city of Jerusalem to Har Hazesim, Umehar lamidbar, and from Har Hazesim to the desert, Umidbar also v'yashvu b'mkoma, and from the desert the Shechina went and went back to its place in heaven. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Eile chashuva el makomi, that I will go back to my place. Mikaporis l'chruv, mikruv l'chruv, umikruv l'miftan. So we said that the Shechina went from the Kaporis to the one Kruv, then to the other Kruv, and then to the threshold of I think the Heichel or the Ulam. The pasuk says, "V'no'ati l'chasham v'dibarti itchem me'al hakaporos." So the pasuk says by Moshe Rabbeinu that I will meet with you on the Kaporos. Uchsiv, and the pasuk says, "Vayirkav al kruv vayalf," that he went on a kruv and took off. Uchsiv, and the pasuk says, "Uchvod Elokei Yisrael na'ala me'al hakruv," and the pasuk also says that the honor of the God of Israel rose up from the kruv asher haya olav, the kruv that it was on, el miftan abayis, to the threshold of the house. And miftan l'chotzer, from the threshold to the courtyard. That the house was filled with smoke, with clouds, and the courtyard was filled with the radiance, glow of the honor of God. From the courtyard to the Mizbeach, that I saw the Eibishter standing on the Mizbeach, and from the Mizbeach to the roof, as the Pasuk says, Tov Losheves al Pinas Gag, that it's good to sit on the corner of a roof. From the roof to the wall, that the Eibishter was standing on the wall. Mechoma La'ir, from the wall to the city, that the voice of the Eibishter will call out La'ir Yikari or Yikra. Friends, what do you think? Should we vote? Yikra. That the sound of God will call out to the people of the city. Me'ir Lahar, from the city to the mountain, to the Har Azeisim. The Pasuk says, Vayal Kvod Hashem al Toch Ha'ir Vayamod al Hahar Asher Mikedem La'ir. And the honor of God got up from in the city and went to the mountain that was to the east of the city. Mehar Midbar, from the mountain to the desert, the Pasuk says, Tov Sheves Be'eretz Midbar, that better to dwell in the desert. Midbar also from the Midbar, the Shechina went and settled in its place. The Pasuk says, I'll go back to my place. Amar Yohanan says, that for 6 months the Shechina waited for the Yidden in the desert, that maybe, perhaps, they might repent. And when the Yidden didn't repent and they didn't return to God, he said, to heck with them. The Pasuk says, that the eyes of the wicked will be pining, and any refuge will be lost from them, and their hope is going to be crushed. Okay, and so we just described how the Shechina traveled 10 travels. So now we are going to describe how the Sandhedrin moved 10 times. So they moved from the Lishkas Hagazus in the Beis Hamikdash to these chonus, to these stores that they had in Har Bayis. Chonus Yerushalayim, from Chonus to Jerusalem, Jerusalem liyavne. Umiyavne leusha, umiusha liyavne, umiyavne leusha, umiusha leshfaram, umishfaram lebeishayim, ubeishayim letziporim, utzipor letveria, utveria amuka mikulan. Friends, you got all those things that they went from the Lishkas Hagazus to Yavne, to the Chonus, to these stores that they had, I guess, in Har Bayis, and from there to the Jerusalem proper, and from there, of course, I live in Jerusalem. Who knows where it was? Maybe it was in Achlot. I don't know. And from there to Yavne, and from Yavne to Usha, from Usha back to Yavne, from Yavne back to Usha, from Usha to Shfaram, Shfaram to Beis Shayim, Beis Shayim to Tzipori, Tzipori to Tveria. What do you want me to tell you? So apparently Rashi says it would go based on where the Nasi was. So wherever the leader was, the Nasi was, so it would go there. So for example, Rabbi Gamliel was in Usha, at least at a time, so it went to Usha. And then, there was other political things that were involved as well, like if the Romans were being mean to them in a certain place, so they had to go somewhere else. And then when Rebbe took over, he was in Beis Shayim, Tiveria, Tzipori. Anyways, so they would kind of move around. Okay. With Tveria Amuka Mikulan, and Tiveria was kind of the lowest of all of them, not necessarily geographically, but I think it wasn't so good, I think. Shenemar, as the Pasuk says, V'shafot me'eretz tidaberi. It's going to get pretty low. Rabbi Lazar Rama says, Rabbi Lazar Sheish Galus, that they would take 6 exiles of the Sanhedrin. Shenemar, as the Pasuk says, Ki Yishach Yoshvei Marum, that the dwellers of the of above will be lowered. Kirya Niskava, the great city Yashbilena, will be lower. Yashbila, and it will go lower, even more. Ad Eretz to the ground, Yagiena, it will reach Ad Offer to the dirt, so it's like 6 travels. But says Rabbi Yochanan, friends, in case you were feeling bad about where this Gemara was going, Rabbi Yochanan says, don't lose hope. In the end, Asidin, in the future, the Goel, the Yidden are going to be redeemed from the dirt. Shenemar is Nairi, may offer Kumi Shvi, wake up from the dust and return to Jerusalem. Friends, what do you think? What do you think about Daf Lamed Aleph Masechta Rosh Hashanah? Very nice, right? All right, and maybe when we come back from the dust and we come to Jerusalem, maybe I'll see you here. We can get pizza. Yeah, we can get pizza. Okay, friends, now we get to a new Mishnah. Amr B'Shua ben Karcha, says Rabbi B'Shua ben Karcha. So I think at one point we saw maybe Rabbi B'Shua ben Karcha either was the son of Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva is referred to as the Kereach, the bald fellow, or it could be somebody else. Okay. Amr B'Shua ben Karcha, says Rabbi B'Shua ben Karcha, V'odzo Siskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai also made this takana. Friends, you ready? Shafilu Rosh Bezdin b'chol makom shall you eidim ochim el makom avad. That even if the Rosh Bezdin isn't right, because we had said earlier that the head of the Bezdin says Mekudash, right? He's the one who sanctifies the new month. Now, what if the head of the Bezdin is somewhere else? So do you go follow him, or do you follow or do you go where the Sandhedrin is? So says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that even if the Rosh Bezdin is in some other place, you go wherever the Sandhedrin is. You don't necessarily have to find and seek out you don't have to seek out the Rosh Bezdin wherever he is. Ha'itza, says the Gemara, there was a certain woman that Azmanua Ladina that she had to come to Bezdin. She owed money, whatever it was. She had to come to Bezdin. Kamid Amemar ben Ardoi, and the Bezdin was before Amemar in Nahardoi. Okay, Nardo. I assume it's talking about Nardo, unless Nardo is something else. See, because I was a little surprised, because I think Nardo was destroyed at a certain point. So Amemar was a little bit later. It's like he was like Shmuel, Rav Nachman, they were in Nardo. But I thought it was destroyed at some point. And anyways, but Amemar says Nardo. Is Nardo or is Nardo a different place? I don't know. Also, Amemar the Mechoza, but at that time Amemar had traveled to Mechoza. Interesting. What was doing in Mechoza? Rava was in Mechoza, but was Amemar a student of Rava? I don't think so. Was he maybe a student? Was he a student of Rav Ashi? I feel like he was. Who did we say was a student of Rav Ashi? Ravina was a student of Rav Ashi. We said in Masechta Eruvin, I think there was a Talmud Chover of Rav Ashi. What about Amemar? Where does he fit in? Because Rav Ashi, I think actually was a student of Kahana. There are 2 Rav Kahanas. One Rav Kahana was a Talmud Chover of Rav, but there was also another Rav Kahana. I think Rav Ashi was a student of Kahana, the second Rav Kahana. Anyways, Amemar was in Mechoza. V'lo Ozlo Basrei, and she didn't go follow Amemar to Mechoza. Okay. So again, she had to go to Bezdin in Nardo with Amemar. Amemar was out of town. He was in Mechoza. She didn't go to Mechoza. Kosav Psicha Ilava. So Amemar says, what's the deal? She should have come to me in Mechoza, where I am. She has to follow me. So he wrote an excommunication against her. Omele Rav Ashi says to Amemar, La Amemar veho onon tnan afilu rosh bezdin b'chol bakom shlo yu ha'edim hochim elu l'makom avad. So Rav Ashi asks Amemar, he says, wait a second, but the Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana that when it comes to Kiddush HaChodesh, you don't go wherever the head of the Bezdin is, you go wherever the Bezdin is. So she went to Nardo where the Bezdin is. You, as the head of the Bezdin, weren't there, but she doesn't have to follow you. So Amemar says, yeah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's takana is by testimony about the new moon. That if you make the witnesses who saw the new moon have to, they go travel where the Sandhedrin is, the head of the Bezdin isn't there, they have to now travel some other place, they're not going to want to come and give testimony in the future. So because we want to support people and encourage them to give testimony whenever they see the new moon, so we say don't bother, finding wherever the head of the Bezdin is, rather just go to wherever the main body of the Bezdin is, and that's enough. But over here, the pasuk says in Mishlei that a borrower is a slave to a lender, and therefore she must go and seek. She's got to come to court, and if I'm out of town, she's got to seek me out. All right. Tanarabanan, the rabbi said, in Kohanim Rashayin lalos b'sandalein leduchin, that Kohanim are not allowed to, when they bless the congregation, they may not be wearing sandals. And this is one of 9 takonas that Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai established. Now, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai, as we saw in the Gemara, or I think a Rashi taka in Masechta Shabbos and Daf Lamed Gimel, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was taka Kohen, and he says that Kohanim are not allowed to wear sandals when they bless the people. Shizda Pirka. So now he said that there were 9 enactments, right? We just said that there were 9 enactments that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai enacted. 6 of them are in this parak. Who could tell me what they are? Well, one of them, of course, is the one that we just said, that the Kohanim don't wear sandals. Rashi tells us the other ones, that they would blow shofar any place where there's a bezdin when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos, and that the lulav, nowadays we take all 7 days Zeichel Mikdash, and that the 16th day of Nisan you refrain from eating Chodesh all day, and that nowadays we accept the testimony of the new moon all day on the 30th day of Elul, as we saw yesterday, and that as we just learned in this Mishnah, that the witnesses don't have to follow the head of the Bezdin, they just go wherever the body of the Bezdin is. So those are the 6 from this parak, V'chada the Pirka Kama, and 1 takana from the first parak, which is that while initially when there was a Beis HaMikdash, the Eidim could be Mechal Shabbos any month, so that in order to ensure that the Korban Musaf was offered on the proper day. However, nowadays there's no Beis HaMikdash, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says that the witnesses can only be Mechal Shabbos for Tishrei and Nisan. The Idach, and the other 2 are the Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, Gershin is Gayer Bizman Hazeh, a convert who converts nowadays, Tzarech she Yafish Ruba Likino, or Rova Likino. Okay? So when a fellow converts, so if he's a man, so he does bris milah, he also goes to the mikvah, and he also has to bring a korban. Nowadays, of course, we don't have korbanos. So says the Brisa, Gershin is Gayer Bizman Hazeh, a fellow who converts Bizman Hazeh, Tzarech sheyafish Rova Likino, so while he can't offer a korban, because we don't have korbanos anymore, however, he could set aside money so that, hopefully the Beis HaMikdash will be built immediately. And then he has the money set aside already, and he'll use that to buy a korban. So you set aside a quarter of a shekel, that's enough apparently to buy 2 birds, and that's sort of the minimum offering that he could bring. So you basically take the minimum offering and put that, the value of the minimum offering, and put that aside, so that when the Beis HaMikdash is rebuilt, you'll be able to use that money to buy a korban. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, K'var nimna aleinu Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai uvitla mipnei hatakala, but says Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai already made a takana and said, don't worry, if you convert, you don't have to set aside this money for the korban, because it could lead to problems, right? You have money that you set aside for a korban, so it's basically hektish. So then it has kedusha. So then what if you use it to buy pizza? Oy vavoy. So therefore, and it's inevitable that you're accidentally going to use it to buy pizza. So therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says, we don't do that anymore. Okay, so that is the 8th takana. And v'idach, Plukta de Rav Papa of Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and in terms of determining the 9th takana, it's taka machlokas Rav Papa and Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Papa Amar, says Rav Papa, Kerem Revoi, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar, Loshen Shel Zahoris. So says Rav Papa, the 9th takana is in relation to Kerem Revoi, which of course we've learnt about. It's that the first 3 years of a fruit tree, the fruits are orla. Then the 4th year, which means that you can't eat it at all, you can't get any benefit, nothing, nada, zilch. And in the 4th year, you can get benefit from it, but it's limited. You can eat the fruits in Jerusalem in the 4th year, not outside of Jerusalem. Now, so Papa Amar Kerem Revoi, so Papa says that the enactment of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was with regard to Kerem Revoi, in that, so Kerem Revoi is basically Neter Revoi, but for a vineyard. The Tanan is within the Mishnah. So just like Meiser Sheni, also Kerem Revoi, you'd be allowed to transfer its value onto money, and instead of schlepping the grapes to Jerusalem, you could just bring the money to Jerusalem and buy food over there. Now, however, if you live within a 1-day journey of Jerusalem, so then we don't want you to just bring money to Jerusalem. We want you to bring fruits to Jerusalem. I don't think that it says it here. Yeah, it does say it over here in a second. Because we want, instead of bringing lots of money to Jerusalem, we want you to bring lots of fruits to Jerusalem. It'll be full of fruit. And, you will have Jerusalem full of delicious, lively, fresh fruits, and it's gewaldig. So therefore we say, look, if you live far away, okay, I understand it's a schlep, but if you live within a day's travel, so we would like you to, rather than transfer the value onto money and bring the money, even though that's easier, if you're within 1 day's travel, 1 day's journey, so bring the fruits so that Jerusalem will be filled with fruit. So again, so if you live within a 1-day journey of Jerusalem, so bring the fruits with you. And this is the 1-day journey boundaries. Eilas min Adarim, ve'akravas min Atzofin. So Eilas in the south, Akravas in the north, Lud min Amayr, ve'yardim min Amizrach. Lud, which is like by Ben Gurion Airport. So that is in the west, and the Jordan in the east. V'amar says Ula v'yitem Rab bar Ula. Amar B'yochanan matam. How come? How come we want to encourage people to bring their fruits with them, so that the markets of Jerusalem are filled with fruits, and it is gewaldig. That Rabbi Eliezer had Kerem Revai, and it was in the east of Lod, i.e. it was between Lod and Jerusalem, so it was within a 1-day journey. B'tzad Kfar Tevi. Uvikesh Rabbi Eliezer la'afkir la'aniyim. And Rabbi Eliezer knew that, okay, he's within a 1-day journey, he was going to have to schlep him to Jerusalem. For whatever reason, he didn't want to do that. So he said, rather than schlep all these grapes to Jerusalem, I will just make them hefker. I'll make them hefker for poor people, and that's that. Talmidav, his student said to him, Rebbe, 1 second, Rabbi Eliezer, you don't need to do that. Your contemporaries already were matir it. Man chaverecha, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai. And who are his contemporaries? Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai. Okay, we're going to ask in a second, but wasn't that his Rebbe? Okay, we'll get there in a minute. But now, so what do we see? So we see that while initially, if you live within a 1-day journey of Jerusalem, so you were encouraged to bring your fruits with you. However, Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai apparently said you don't need to do that, and that was the 9th takana according to Rav Papa. Now, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Lashon shel Zahoris, that the takana was with regard to the red wool that after the Soyer HaMishtaleach, the goat that was dropped off the cliff, if the Yidden were atoned, it would become white. Titanis we taka learn in the Brisa Barishona Yukoshin Lashon shel Zahoris al Pesach Ulam Bachutz. That initially, friends, this is a Brisa that we saw in Masech Yoma, of course, that initially they would tie the crimson wool onto the entrance of the antechamber of the ulam, mibachutz, outside. Now, if the crimson wool became white, if the red wool became white, so then they were very, very happy. Gewaldig, they were atoned. But if it didn't become white, and it didn't always become white, so then they would be sad. Hiskin Shayu koshin also al Pesach ulami bifnim. So they said, you know what? Tie it not on the outside of the heichal, rather of the ulam, rather tie it on the inside, so that it doesn't become a whole thing. Because if it doesn't become white, the people get sad, and we don't want that. I know you mitzitzin v'roin, but people would still try to chop a peak. So hilbin are you smechin, hilbin are you atzef? And then when they would chop that peak, the word would then spread. And if it became white, so gewaldig. But if it didn't become white, so the people would be sad. Hiskinu sheyu koshin also chetzu b'sela v'chetzu bin karnov shosayim mishtaleach. So they made a further takana. You know what? Just take the crimson wool, tie half of it on a rock, and half of it between the horns of the goat that will be dropped off the cliff. Now, Fact the Gemara. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, my time lo amar Rav Papa. How come Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak didn't say like Rav Papa? Rav Papa says that the takana was with regard to the fruits not having to be brought to Jerusalem. So that's what Rav Papa said. So how come Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak didn't agree with that the takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is that you don't need to schlep the fruits to Jerusalem? So Amalach, because Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak will say to you, Isagadaitech Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Chaver of Rabbi Eliezer mihavu rabu avu. So it says Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak that the students of Rabbi Eliezer responded to him and said, your friends, your contemporaries, your colleagues already said that you don't need to bring the fruits to Jerusalem. Was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Rabbi Eliezer's colleague? No, he was not. He was Rabbi Eliezer's Rebbe. As we know from the Mishnah Pirkei Avos, that he was one of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's 5 students. We also know from the Gemara Masechta Sukkah that describes that Rabbi Eliezer only said things that he heard from his Rebbe Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and all the similarities between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. What was that? Daf Chavtes? Chavtes Amar Aleph, who could tell me? Anyways, so Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says it's difficult for me to get behind that, for me to agree that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was the one who made the takana, because after all, he's not a colleague of Rabbi Eliezer. V'idach, whereas Rav Papa argues, Kevin the Talmidim Avu Labaruch Ayr Lememrele Lerabe Rabuch, whereas Rav Papa argues that nonetheless it is a reference to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and the reason why the students of Rabbi Eliezer referred to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai as a colleague of Rabbi Eliezer is because, well, since they themselves were the students of Rabbi Eliezer, so out of respect, it's not, you can argue that it's not respectful for the students of Rabbi Eliezer to be referring to Rabbi Eliezer as a student himself, so rather they kind of, euphemistically refer to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai as Rabbi Eliezer's colleague, even though the truth is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was Rabbi Eliezer's teacher. Fine, okay. Rav Papa, my timer, the Amr Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. How come Rav Papa didn't hold like Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak that the takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was with regard to the crimson wool? So listen to this, friends. Amr Lach will say to you, Isagadatech Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, B'mei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai mi'avaloshin shazoris. But 1 second, during the days of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, was there even this red crimson wool thing? We learn in Brayta Kol Shnoso Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Mei be'esrim shana. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, friends, he lived for 120 years. Memshana also Prakmatia, Memshana Laman, Memshana Limed. Friends, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, 120 years. First 40 years of his life, he was in business. Second 40 years of his life, he was learning. The last 40 years of his life, he was teaching. Okay? Vitania, we learn in the Brayta, Memshana called Mishnecha V'bayis Lohayu Loshin Shalzoris Malbin Elamaidim. And we said that for the last 40 years before the Second Temple was destroyed, the crimson wool would never become white. It would just remain red. So now, V'tanani, we learn in the Mishnah, Mishacharev Habayis, Hisin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made takanas. Meaning, so if we add all this together, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was teaching the last 40 years of his life. Okay? Now, so therefore, if we're saying that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made this takana about the crimson wool, that it would be tied to the rock and the goat, because sometimes we become red, sometimes we become white. Well, sometimes we remain red, sometimes it will become white. So Mistama, this takana that he made was in the last 40 years of his life when he was teaching, when he was sort of I guess the leader, and because before then he was in business, he was learning, but in the point in his life when he would be in a position where he was making takanas for all of Israel would certainly be the last 40 years of his life. And we also said over here that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made takanas even after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, which means that Memele he lived after the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed as well. So therefore, that means that when he became in a leadership position, which was the last 40 years of his life, it also means that it was within the last 40 years that the temple stood. And we also said that within the last 40 years of the temple, there was no such thing as the wool becoming white. It remained red all the time. So therefore, would it make sense that this takana, which was in the context of the wool sometimes being red, sometimes being white, that must have been more than 40 years before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and yet Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would have only made that takana within the last was only making takanas within the last 40 years of the temple. So Memele, this takana, which must have been earlier than 40 years, could not have been Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. That is Rav Papa's argument against Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. The Idach was Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak will argue, Osum Arboim Shana de Lomad Talmud Yoshev Fnei Rabbo Hava v'Amar Milsa de Istaber Taimei v'Kav Rabbi Bishmei. Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Eino Chinami. He says, Eino Chinami. That takana must have been more than 40 years before the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, and it's true that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived after the Beis Hamikdash at least a little bit, enough to make certain takanas after the Beis Hamikdash, as we saw in the Mishnah, right? That Mishachar Abai is Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was making takanas even after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So Memele, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived after the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, and the last 40 years that he was teaching only began within the last 40 years of the temple. However, and it was after that takana was made. However, nonetheless, he was the one to make that takana, but not while he was in his teaching phase, but while he was in his learning phase. That while he was in learning his phase, he was like a student in front of his Rebbe, and he suggested this takana, and his Rebbe said, yes, run with it. And therefore, even this takana that he made, sure, it was earlier than it was more than 40 years before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, but he still made the takana even when he was still in his learning mode, and it is attributed to him. That is Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's argument to say that the takana was related to the wool on Yom Kippur. All right, friends. So that was Daf Lamed Aleph, Daf 31 of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. So basically, friends, it was a cool daf, right? I don't know what, there was like the whole thing about the Shir Shal Yom, that they would say the Beis Hamikdash, fine. But then there was a whole thing about Yom Shekulo Shabbos, and like 6,000 years of the world, and then it's going to be destroyed for 1,000, and then maybe 2,000. That was very interesting stuff, right? And then the 10 journeys that the Shechina traveled, and the 10 journeys that the Sandhedrin traveled, and the 9 takanas of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and the life of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He lived for 120 years. 40 years, in business, 40 years learning, 40 years working. It's gewaldige stuff, friends. So, anyways, that was Daf Lamed Aleph of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoy your day. Bye.